So evidently, if you are looking at Amad in isolation, playing him as a right-sided attacker in the front three is going to lead to him having higher output than if he was playing as a right wing back. But the problem with most analysis around individual players is that people only look at the micro rather than the macro, and they ignore the bigger picture. Yes, if you're solely focused on extracting the most from Amad, and you're just focused about getting the best out of him solely, Amorim should of course use him in that more advanced role. But if playing Amad as a right-sided attacker and say Mazraoui as a right wing back and Euro coming into the back three leads to the overall team performance diminishing, it's obviously not the right option. And so the questions I'm going to be answering are, why would using Amad as a right wing back be a greater net positive than using him further forward? In the mid to long term, what is Amad's best role in Amorim's system, considering the other players on the market that United could bring in? And if Amad is to either be used as a right wing back or a right-sided attacker, which players should United be looking to bring into the side, either from inside the squad already or when looking to sign players in 2025? So let's start off with why Amorim may see Amad as a better option as a right wing back. Well, it's purely because in that right wing back role, other than Antony, United don't have anyone who is stylistically similar to Giovanni Quenda. And so if Amorim wants that style of right wing back, essentially a left-footed right winger, it's either Amad or Antony, and right now Amad is clearly the better option. But before I go any further, if you're a fan of retro jerseys, go over to Jersey FIFA. They've got a variety of different club and international retro shirts, as well as the new season jerseys as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a discount. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which I will leave linked in the description. Many people seem to think that using Amad as a right wing back will make him completely ineffective going forward. However, I actually think that in possession, he tracks the opposition fullback all the way into the back line. And this is why people who vehemently wanted our wingers under Ten Hag to constantly be tracking all the way back, but don't want Amad to be used as a right wing back, are completely misguided. Because as Ruben Amorim said in one of his press conferences, Amad's role as a wing back in the 3-4-3 is essentially just the role that most of the fan base wanted Rashford to play under Ten Hag. And this is the problem with how most football fans interpret formations and systems. They look at the names on the team sheet, see a right winger starting as a wing back, and instantly think that that's a more defensive role than if they were used in the midfield line. But this is completely dependent on the defensive system and the possession system. And in possession, Amad is playing far more like a winger than he is like a fullback in that position, and I think against Ipswich we saw how Amad can still be incredibly effective from that right wing back position. Like a Savinho, Doku or a Matoma are, he definitely has the ability, and it's really just consistency in those 1v1s at the moment, and if he is able to improve his explosiveness, then he has everything in his toolkit to become a 1v, very similar to Lamine Yamal, who would be my dream option in that right wing back role in Amorim's system. And by using a player like Amad at right wing back, the obvious benefit is that you get to use Amad in the same areas where you'd want him picking up the ball anyway, whilst also then getting to use another right-sided attacker on the pitch. Whereas if you use Amad as an interior right forward, you then need to find a winger or a wing back who can provide what Amad does in that right wing back position, both in and out of possession, which I think is a much harder task than finding someone to play that right-sided interior forward position, because United already have players like Mount, Bruno, Rashford and Garnacho in the squad. Whereas at right wing back, if Amorim wanted to find a player who was stylistically similar to Amad or Quenda, who he used at Sporting, he'd have to go with Antony, which is a much greater drop off in terms of individual ability. Now obviously if Amad develops into an elite level attacker in terms of his goal scoring and chance creation in the final third, then yes, you may want to push him further forward into that more advanced role to give him greater offensive freedom, but also allow him to drop into deeper positions and influence the play as someone like Bernardo Silva does. But whilst Amad does certainly have elite level potential, solely off of current ability he isn't elite, not because of his natural talent or even his ball progression, but solely down to his output in the final third. In the mid to long term, personally, I would consider selling Højlund and Rashford and replacing them with Gyökeres and Isak. Højlund and Rashford probably bring in between 100 to 120 million pounds combined, and Gyökeres and Isak would likely cost between 150 and 170 million pounds combined, so that upgrade would cost around 50 million pounds net. But that improvement to the forward line would be incredible, especially with Amad at right wing back, one of Bruno or Mount in the right-sided half space, and someone like Theo Hernandez or Alvaro Fernandez at left wing back, and then Garnacho, Xerxes and Chido Obi Martin as bench options. I think Bruno, Mount and Garnacho are absolute perfect options to play ahead of Amad, because they all offer different things. Bruno obviously brings the elite level creativity, and his movement towards the ball, dropping into narrower positions between the lines, is going to work to drag the opposition's fullback narrow, opening up space down the channel for Amad to burst into from a deeper position. And if the fullback decides to hold his wider position to stop this space being created for Amad, he then is forced to leave Bruno Fernandes free between the lines. Garnacho, despite being out of form and needing to improve his composure and decision making in the final third, has the pace and the movement ahead of Amad to provide the necessary over and underlapping runs, which work as facilitating movements, dragging the left back and left sided centre back deep on that side, providing Amad with the couple of yards of space he will need to then cut inside onto his left foot. If the defenders on that side hold their positions, now Amad has genuine pace ahead of him and can thread Garnacho down the line, where from, unlike on the left, he doesn't have to overly think about how he's going to cut back inside onto his right foot, but instead this will simplify his decision making and enable Garnacho to put in a low cross across the box or a cut back to the edge of the box or the penalty spot. Mason Mount would offer a blend between the two, probably the best option when fit. I think Mount ahead of Amad both in possession on the transition, but also when looking to combine against a deeper block down the flank, is perfect for that role. But also from a pressing and defensive point of view, I think Mount and Amad on that side is a great combination. For balance purposes, having a right footer ahead of Amad works best, because you've then got one of Bruno, Mount or Garnacho who can provide the movement and crossing down the outside, with Amad providing the passing and shooting and cutting inside of players you want me to analyse, and I'll insert them into different videos. So if you want to sign up to that, I'll leave the Patreon linked in all the usual places. Against Nottingham Forest, I think we saw how Amad and Bruno Fernandes can work very well on the right flank together. In this example, we see Lenny Yoro has possession, and you can clearly see Amorim's positional setup when United have the ball in the opposition's half. You've got the back three with the box shape in front, and as you can see, Bruno Fernandes does very well to open the passing lane from Lenny Yoro as one of the wide centre-backs in the back three, which is a mixture between Bruno Fernandes' intelligence himself, as well as Amorim's work on the training ground with the players, as far too often under Ten Hag there was a clear lack of instruction and practice in this particular situation, with our midfield and forward line often caught behind the opposition players with no clear passing lane open, leading to stagnant ball progression. Yoro's pass into Bruno is good, and Bruno is quick to take a touch and instantly get it out to Amad before looking to spin the presser behind him. However, the movement we would see from Garnacho and Mount in this type of situation is going to be different to what we would see from Bruno Fernandes, and neither is good or bad. They just open up different opportunities for different patterns of play depending on the skill set of the player in that position. If Garnacho or Mount are here, I think they immediately look to break between Nico Williams and Murillo, providing the underlapping run to either receive the pass in behind from Amad or use it as a facilitating run, dragging Anderson deep and then opening up space on the inside for Amad to cut into. But I also think in this type of situation, if Amad wants to get to the elite level, he needs to improve his 1v1 dribbling ability, particularly his explosiveness, as once he has this ability, he just becomes a much greater threat, not being as reliant on players around him, and instead being able to beat his man and drive down the outside, which he can certainly do on occasion, but he's not yet at the level where he can do it consistently throughout a game. However, Amad and Bruno still work the opportunity very well, with Amad coming in field onto his left foot, Bruno checking his run to offer that short passing option to feet, where from Amad's pass goes into his feet and his movement in behind Anderson works to drag the two Forest players deeper, opening up space for Bruno Fernandes to get the ball out of his feet and put in an excellent cross. But this is where I think we need an interior attacker on the other side to Bruno or Mount, who is more of an inside forward, who can attack that space and get in front of his man and connect with the cross. And that's why I would prefer Marcus Rashford to Garnacho, but I think someone like Alexander Isak would be even better than both in this type of situation. Now just a few minutes later, Onana has possession inside of his own box, he plays a pass out to Dalot, and this is an example of why I think Dalot is so underrated, as people hyperfixate on the odd defensive mistake he makes, but completely ignore how consistent he is with his ball progression from deeper areas of the pitch. For most players in this type of situation, if they're left-footed, they are restricted either to a pass up the line or a pass inside into Mainu before then looking to sprint ahead and receive the 1-2. And most right-footers are going to be forced inside, either infield to Mainu or back to Onana. However, Dalot's technical ability and acceleration is such that he's going to burst up the line and take the Forest presser completely out of the game. And he's able to do this by disguising a pass inside for Mainu before then dragging the ball back the other way and driving down the outside of Jota Silva. And now he's single-handedly able to progress the ball out of the defensive third, and now eventually when he does play the pass inside into Mainu, rather than Mainu receiving the ball in the defensive third under pressure with his back to goal, he is now receiving it facing goalwards in the middle third. And so you can see how good Dalot is in this part of the pitch. because he makes it so much easier for Mainu and Agate ahead of him. But also what you'll see as Dalot is driving forward, Agate and Mainu are pushing up the pitch as a unit, maybe with 10 yards between them, which from a rest defence point of view is exactly what you want, as if Dalot was to lose possession here, it's a lot easier for Mainu and Agate to close off the space and stop the counter than if they had been dragged 20 to 25 yards apart, leaving one of them isolated, as we routinely saw under Ten Hag with Eriksen and Casemiro. And we also see why I think Amorim needs at least one of the interior attackers wide of the centre forward to have some real pace and be a kind of hybrid between a winger and an attacking midfielder, and not simply number 10s like Trincao or Pedro Goncalves at Sporting, whose lack of pace limited Amorim's side. As Dalot drives forward, rather than retaining a central position in the half space, Garnacho spins into the channel, and now because of his pace he's able to provide a run down the side of Ola Aina, which firstly offers a chance for Dalot to release Garnacho in behind, but also drags Aina deeper to track the run, opening up the space in front for Dalot to carry the ball into. And that's why simply rebuilding the profiles that Amorim had at Sporting and not actively trying to improve the system by identifying what his Sporting system lacked is exactly what went wrong with Ten Hag, who was simply trying to rebuild his Ajax side. And if United do that again, they aren't going to be able to build a side capable of winning the Premier League. Instead it will be a side with exactly the same limitations that Amorim had at Sporting, with their lesser budget and access to elite level players. People think understanding a manager's system is just by looking at their previous team and just trying to rebuild it with similar players. That's not actually understanding a manager's system or the principles behind it. You're simply just looking back at the previous side and picking players who are similar to those players. That's not understanding the system. Moving on, when the ball goes back inside into Mainu, once again we see that box shape in midfield, and this is a crucial principle of Amorim's possession system. Bruno Fernandes holds his position on the far side in that half space area rather than drifting centrally or over to the left side where the ball is, and this means that when Agate receives possession, United can now access the half space on that side, with Bruno being positioned between Anderson and Hudson-Odoi, which subsequently allows United to work the ball out to Ahmad once again, setting him up in the 1v1 situation. Now in this sort of position, I think during certain periods of the game, Amorim could give his right-sided centre-back the licence to join the attack down that right side, in order to provide an overlap ahead of Ahmad. Yoro was playing as the right-sided centre-back in this game, so he's probably better suited to sitting behind the play in the rest defence. But if you had Mazraoui there, having Bruno Fernandes on the inside of Ahmad, and Mazraoui providing this sort of overlapping run down the outside, this not only is going to provide Ahmad with another way of progressing the ball into a dangerous crossing position, but is also going to drag opposition players away from him and open up space for him to come inside onto his left foot. Which throughout the course of a game, if this sort of pattern of play was to happen say 5 or 6 times, is without doubt going to benefit Ahmad, allowing him to get into better crossing, passing and shooting positions when he does cut inside onto his left foot. However, in this example, once again Bruno Fernandes checks his run, holds back slightly from Anderson to open up that passing lane from Ahmad into his feet, and once again when he receives the ball he puts in a dangerous cross, which this time is deflected behind by Murillo. But throughout this game and in previous games you could see Bruno and Ahmad connecting frequently down that right side, and I think the right side is definitely where United look most dangerous, and utilising Ahmad as a right wing back allows you to then use Bruno Fernandes on that side with him as a right-sided interior attacker, alongside a powerful runner like Mazraoui to provide those overlaps ahead. But if you were to use Ahmad as a right-sided attacker, which could definitely be an option if you have say Højlund up front, potentially with someone like Alvaro Fernandes if he is brought in at left wing back, overlapping on the left behind someone like Bruno Fernandes or Rashford, then you would need an overlapping right wing back like Jeremy Frimpong, who is right-footed, just to keep the balance on the side. And so this is why I don't think it makes sense to sign a left-footed right winger like Quenda, for example, because if you then want to use Ahmad from the right of a front three, the balance is all wrong, with both Ahmad and Quenda needing a right footer to provide the movement ahead of them. And so when I'm seeing people saying I don't understand Amorim's system because he likes to use a left footer on the right, and so Frimpong isn't a good option, I don't think you understand that simply copying the profiles of Amorim's Sporting system player for player is not understanding the system. Anyone can do that. We aren't just rebuilding Amorim's Sporting, we're building Amorim's Manchester United, and you need to build a squad with variety so you can get the best out of the existing players. We already have a left footer who can play as a right wing back in Ahmad, but we don't have someone with the pace of Frimpong that can provide the pace ahead on the overlap, which would be what Ahmad needs playing from the right side of the front three, or even what the team needs against certain opposition.